Hello, and welcome back to the Out of Frame podcast. I'm your host, Sean Malone. I'm here with Paul Nelson and Jennifer Maffasanti. Welcome back. This is our fourth episode. Hopefully we're getting a little bit better as time goes on. Today, nope, apparently not. Right off the rails, right immediately.
Trying to hold it together.
Trying to hold it together, but no. We've had, I don't know, first couple episodes I think have been pretty interesting. This episode we wanted to talk about the movie Parasite, which we'll get to in a little bit. It's the first time I'd seen that movie. I was not a huge Bong Joon-ho fan going into this, so I think it's...
You are not.
I was not.
You are underselling that quite a bit.
Well, fair enough. We'll get into that in a little bit, but before we do, Paul, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. As I've said earlier, I got two young boys, and my oldest is actually starting to watch the old school Magic School Bus.
Nice.
And it's so much fun because I'm reliving these episodes that I still remember from when I was like 7 years old.
Yeah.
Which is surprising to me.
I bet they're in there. I have no idea if I'd remember them or not, but I bet.
It's kind of scary how much I remember. I remember like beat for beat, not quite the words, but wow. There's specific episodes that he has watched. I'm like, yeah, I remember every single thing about that. And what's really cool to see is just him learning, and kind of going through especially with like planets. He's into planets right now and space, and just learning about everything, and also using the same thing that I used as a kid.
That's crazy.
And he sought it out himself. Like we were flipping through Netflix trying to watch something, and he saw it and he's like, I want to watch that.
Didn't they reboot that? Isn't there like some new-ish version?
There is. It's not.
I haven't watched.
I'm also very partial to the original, but yeah, it's like the Magic School Bus rides again or something like that.
What?
I'm probably wrong, but it's something along those lines. And I don't think Miss Frizzle's in it.
I feel like that's like.
Wait a second.
How would you?
How do you even have Magic School Bus without Miss Frizzle?
I gotta say too, I was never sure if the school bus was magic or if Miss Frizzle.
It's 100% Miss Frizzle.
It seemed like it was her. Yeah. So like she could have been in any school bus.
Yeah.
And probably turned it into whatever.
Probably.
I don't know. She's a witch. Oh man, that sounds fun. I'm always a little hesitant to revisit anything like that because it's all probably actually a lot worse than I remember it being. And B, I don't know. I feel like you shouldn't go back sometimes.
No, some things are left better in the past.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the references still very mid-90s.
Oh, yeah.
The ending is all these kids around the world are calling in on their landlines. And I'm looking at my kid. I'm like, you have no idea what those are.
Yeah. I see that. Well, like we were watching E.T. a couple weeks ago for the show and like, just seeing it just brought back sort of nightmares of like the 20-foot long cable that you try to stretch through the house.
Oh, yeah.
And you like try to get to the living room and maybe just barely kind of get over there.
So you could get like some measure of privacy so you didn't have to talk to your best friend in the middle of the kitchen.
Also, the fact that your mom could literally pick up the phone anywhere else in the house.
And just
listen in. Just brilliant things that kids now have absolutely no frame of reference for.
And Pluto's still a planet in Magic School.
I think
right.
Is it a planet again?
I don't think it's been reclassified. I think its demotion to dwarf planet still stands.
It was, but I thought I remember something like a couple years ago about them maybe reinstating its planetary
status. I don't know
if
they're revisiting that or not.
By the way, that's Neil deGrasse Tyson's fault, I'm pretty sure.
Well, he was one of the ones who was very outspoken in changing Pluto's classification from planet to dwarf planet. And honestly, it makes sense to me.
I'm not like...
Because if you call Pluto a planet...
I'm not holding on to this for any particular reason.
Because if you call Pluto a planet, by that definition, you have to include like 12 other
Maybe
solar bodies.
We should, and then we're like, our solar system has 20.
We're going to have to come up with like the longest acronym. It's no longer going to be My Very Elegant Mother.
I don't recall ever actually hearing that as like a mnemonic device.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
It's going to be...
So yeah.
I don't want to denigrate.
It's going to be like a million words long that nobody's going to remember, and that defeats the purpose.
I don't want to denigrate mnemonic devices because they are obviously very useful, but I've never found it that difficult to just remember the planet names.
I mean...
There's not a lot.
No.
There's not too many of them. And
They're very memorable.
They're pretty memorable, yeah. So, I don't know. So, I haven't been, like, honestly, outside of some of the stuff that we've been watching, or just we just recently put out a new Out of Frame feature episode on Superman, which is an episode that I've wanted to write for a long time. So I did spend a good chunk of time like going back over a bunch of Superman and Justice League animated movies and rewatched. I rewatched Man of Steel. I rewatched Superman the movie, and I did that kind of stuff. I'm actually weirdly, after making the Out of Frame episode, kind of want to revisit Superman Returns, even though it's not a very good movie. So when Superman Returns came out, it was 2006, and I was in graduate school and in New York City, and I lived in Queens, and I lived about, I don't know, like New York blocks are longer than any other city's kind of normal blocks, but like I think I lived about 6 to 8 blocks away from a United Artists Theater, from like a multiplex. And that movie came out when I was living there, and I would walk there. When that movie came out, I think I saw it in theaters maybe 6 or 7 times.
Oh, wow.
And I just walk up there middle of the day, you know, like if I didn't have something to, you know, a class, or if
Just
I
catch the
whatever.
matinee.
And I would just go up there at like noon or whatever and watch that movie. And the reason that I did that, knowing that like actually a lot of that movie is not great, is because of essentially the actual instance of Superman returning. Mm-hmm. Like a lot of that movie I really don't like because it's a rehash of the 1978 Donner movie. I mean, Lex Luthor's plan is literally exactly the same plan. There's no difference. He wants to blow up part of the world so he can create more land for himself. Like he's bought some like inland area, and it's dumb. It's a stupid plan. And then now he wants to, turn part of the Earth into except for this version is he wants to turn it into like a kryptonite landmass, which no one in any part of the world would want to live in.
Nope.
It made no sense. But the moment where Superman actually comes back, saves the space shuttle, and then saves the plane, and then like lands the plane, is like just goosebumps. Every time I went back and watched it over and over and over again. I'm thinking about doing that again because we used a bunch of those clips in the Out of Frame episode, and now I'm like, can I stomach watching the rest of that movie knowing that it's bad if I get to watch that and like 2 or 3 other like really awesome hero moments? I don't know. I'm not really sure if I want to do that yet, but I'm thinking about it. Otherwise, I've just been watching HGTV. It's pretty much my life right now is watching Property Brothers. So.
A lot of shiplap?
No, not on Property Brothers. The Fixer Upper show. You get the shiplap. That's Chip and Joanna's.
Excuse me, sorry.
Deal, but no, Jonathan Scott doesn't do shiplap very often.
Fair enough,
but it's good.
Yeah,
I don't know. It's something to have on.
Yeah. I've been doing a lot of like professional development reading. Thanks to Sean, I have a lovely long list of like screenwriting and storytelling resources that I've just been gradually working through. The most recent one is a screenwriting sort of how-to called Save the Cat. It's by Blake Snyder.
Yeah.
And it basically goes through like the 15 major beats that pretty much all plots, all good stories, all solid stories go through over the course of being told. And it's called...
I told you this. Like it honestly my favorite structure book. I don't think there's a better screenwriting structure.
Yeah, as far as like structure is concerned, it is far and away the best one that I've encountered. Just breaking it down point by point, where each of these beats should fall within the course of your story, and if you hit all those beats, and you've got a good story. And if you can map them all out, the actual writing process will be so much easier for you. And it's I thought it was such a funny name for a book.
Makes sense, though.
But it does make sense because it has to do with character building.
Yeah.
No matter who your characters are, what they're supposed to do, what they are doing, whether they're good or bad or hero or anti-hero, at some point very early in the story, they need to have a moment where they, quote unquote, save the cat, where they demonstrate some sort of redeeming humanity within themselves to so that the viewer or the reader or the listener, whatever medium you're going through, kind of identifies and begins to feel empathy towards these characters. They become invested in these characters, and so they're willing to follow them on their further adventures.
The irony of this is that, so I've talked to various people over the years about that book. I mean, I'm not some like hipster hero here for finding Save the Cat. It is a very famous and very popular screenwriting book. But the funny thing is, once you like internalize that a little bit, you see it literally everywhere.
Everywhere.
And so even a lot of the shows and movies and stuff that we incorporated into that Superman Out of Frame, Superman, the original cut of that movie includes Superman saving a cat. Literally, like the
literally
opening,
like from a tree or something like that.
Yeah, the actual opening of that movie, and you can see it in the extended versions, whatever. It literally opens with Superman floating down from space, little girl calling to her cat up in a tree, and he just grabs the cat out of the tree and gives it back to this little girl. And it's actually a really sweet scene because he then does something even more endearing, I think, and more indicative of his values, which is she kind of scolds the cat, and he actually like pauses for a minute and says, "Oh, you don't need to yell at him. Everybody gets scared a little bit sometimes." And like then it's really actually kind of a heartbreaking scene because then she goes back in her house and gets yelled at by her mom.
Oh.
So it's like there's weird like layers to that where it's just like Superman taking one little moment to say like you can kind of break the cycle. And then that got cut out of the movie. But then the other thing too is like in The Incredibles, one of the first things that Mr. Incredible does in the middle of stopping a robbery, the old lady runs out in the street, Mr. Incredible, right? Has to stop and get a cat out of the tree there too. So there are a lot of like very literal iterations to that. But honestly, like the idea of it is what I think should carry on.
Yeah, just that little flicker of humanity that makes us begin to invest in this person.
Show me something that suggests that you care about the people and the the life that's in your world a little bit, and I think it can be so subtle, and it goes a long way to helping you endear yourself to a character. And with that, I think this is a pretty good segue into the movie we want to talk about for this week, Parasite, because Parasite does not have a save the cat moment.
Nope.
We'll get to that in a minute. So let's talk about one of the things kind of I'd like to do this time is maybe get through the plot a little bit more specifically and then get into kind of our thoughts about it. So we'll try to do a quick plot synopsis. I'll do my best here, but basically, Parasite is a film about a family of husband, wife, a daughter, and a son who are generally fairly poor, and I don't know if you'd say that they're like down on their luck or whatever, but they're not a wealthy family. They're not doing very well in life, and they're living in this kind of basement, this kind of dirty basement and stuff. And they find an opportunity to kind of ingratiate themselves into, or grift their way really into, a wealthier family's household. So first by the son becomes a tutor, an English tutor for the wealthier family's daughter, and then he figures out a way to sort of convince them to hire his sister as an art tutor for their young son, and then they collectively figure out a way to get their father involved, and then eventually get their mother in as driver and housekeeper. And as they do this, they keep kind of insinuating themselves more and more into this wealthy family's lives. And, kind of as the name would suggest, kind of in a parasitic kind of way where they keep taking more and more and more from the family. It kind of culminates in, the wealthier family goes on a camping trip, and then this poorer family is kind of taken over their space. They've sprawled out in the living room. They're, they've messed up the whole place. They're drinking and kind of eating whatever, like on their kind of immaculate, living room. And so, we'll get into like proper spoilers for like the actual, the third act and kind of the end of this, because it goes wildly off the rails from there. But in general, the film is essentially that story of just this increasingly escalating kind of domination of this family into this other family's life. So I don't know, Paul, what did you think about the film?
Yeah, so I went in to watch this and I was expecting not to like it.
Yeah.
And
why?
I had heard about what all the hot takes were coming out after this filming and after people saw it, and it also isn't one of those movies that I would normally gravitate towards.
Well, and keep in mind it's a Korean film and it's in Korean, so we it's subtitled, which
right.
Well,
is a barrier sometimes for people, for sure.
It wasn't necessarily that, just the Oscar bait type of stuff.
Yeah.
It's usually not my jam.
Yeah.
But I really enjoyed this movie. It really, I think it's kind of one of those things for me, it's wherever you fall on the political spectrum, you can see something that you would agree with. And while I think I disagree a lot with what the main reading of a lot of reviewers had, which is rich people are bad, class warfare is kind of what this is about. I kind of read it as the rich family were just, kind of aloof, but there was no ill intentions toward the poor family.
Yeah, I definitely want to get into that in a little bit, because I think all the hot takes about that movie were just bafflingly wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think they were just completely wildly off the mark, which is weird.
Which is very weird. I could see how someone, if you're like, I'm looking for it.
If you're really looking for it, maybe. But even then,
but then you have to like squint your eyes and tilt your head and like wrinkle up your nose, and then maybe you catch it.
Yeah, we'll get into it. How did you feel about the movie?
I thought that this was a beautifully shot, beautifully directed, slow burn of a movie that I just hated.
Fair.
Like, as you said, Sean, there was no save the cat moment for anyone in this film.
Yeah.
And so we spend the first two acts, or I spent the first two acts, wondering why I was even watching this, other than the fact that I knew we were going to be talking about it.
Yeah.
So I'm like, why am I supposed to care about anything that these jokers are doing? Like, I had no emotional investment. And even if a character is not likable, they don't have to be likable, but you need to feel something about them.
Yeah.
My level of apathy for these characters was simply shocking.
Yeah.
Like I really didn't care what happened to these people, any of them. And then once the stakes begin to be raised, things start actually happening, like dramatic things. And we see little hints of empathy here and there.
Yeah.
Like, you've already lost me, man.
Yeah.
Like, it is too late at this point
I would
to
say
just shove all that.
It's even, again,
into the third act.
as a foreign film especially, I find that's a really tough bar to clear. 'Cause
Yeah.
you're already doing work. Like, I don't have anything against subtitled films. I've watched many of them over the course of my life, but we should recognize that it is a layer of additional work that you have to do while watching a movie. And if you're not invested, like that stuff I'll do all day long for Kurosawa. I've done
It's
it
a good example.
with things like Fellini. I'll do it even, although I actually don't mind the overdubs, but of like Miyazaki and like a lot of those films.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of times people like watching those in their Japanese form.
Yeah.
And but this was one, I'll admit, like that was a little tough because it was like, so I'm a little bit in between these two. Like I expected, like you said, Paul, I expected to actually hate this movie. And I expected that because I absolutely despise Snowpiercer.
Oh.
Bong Joon-ho's,
movie.
one of his previous movies, I was going to say it's his most recent. It's not actually. I think Okja is more recent. And I didn't see Okja because I hated Snowpiercer. And I hated everything about Snowpiercer. I did not like the green screen quality that movie had. Like, I thought a lot of the cinematography was really bad. I thought, like, just the premise of the movie was terrible. Like, I didn't like anything about that movie.
Yeah. I turned it off. I didn't finish it.
Oh, Mary.
And if you could not get me to sit through an entire movie starring Chris Evans, like,
right?
Yeah.
that's a problem for me.
It's
tough. Like, that's a pretty strong indicator.
I mean, we went to see it at the AFI Theater in Silver Spring in Maryland. It's like, no, hated that movie. And so I was not looking forward to watching Parasite because, for that reason, really, because I was like, I'd heard all of the hot takes.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Heard all this stuff that it's going to be this class warrior, class warfare kind of movie. And I wasn't really into that. And then the fact that I'd already seen Snowpiercer, and it was like, this is going to be awful. And I found my expectations were wildly subverted.
Yep.
And I thought it was far better than I expected it to be. I don't love it by any stretch of the imagination. I'll probably never watch it again. But, and part of it gets to Jen's point, which is like, I did not invest in any of these characters. But the way that I kind of look at the movie is like just look at it as a thriller. Mm-hmm. And you look at it as sort of unfolding and constantly escalating, like, tension, basically, in that movie. From that standpoint, it actually worked for me. I think that worked pretty well.
I'll allow that. Like,
Yeah. The judge's ruling.
I have spoken.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's tough though, because it's like, it's not a movie where anybody is like, well, and again, coming back to the wealthy family, they were likable enough to me, except for there's just not a lot there. Like the mom is fine. The mom is described at the beginning of the movie as being simple. Like she is.
It's simple. Yeah.
And weirdly, that's probably an accurate way to describe her. She's not. She is just kind of I don't even know if I want to call her a trophy wife. Really, I'm not really sure. But she's doing the best she can. She's not particularly thoughtful about anything. She doesn't really vet any of these people. Mm-hmm. She gets fairly easily taken in by their stories, so she's not really somebody who's... But mostly I just feel like that's innocence. She's just not looking for people to take advantage of her.
She cares very deeply about her children.
She loves her kids.
She does.
And
but that's the thing. I don't see anything with the rich family to really hate. Like, the rich family doesn't seem to mistreat any of their employees. They seem to pay them relatively well. They talk several times in the movie about, whether or not they're paying people enough or whether or not they could do more. They're nice.
Yep.
They don't berate anybody or abuse anybody. They don't shout at anybody. The dad seems like generally a very good dad. Loves his kids. Comes home and his kids are happy to see him. They play together.
Right.
They go camping together.
The worst you could say is they're aloof.
Yeah, right.
They're just
aloof.
a bit standoffish.
But also they're aloof in the context of, like,
an employer-employee relationship.
Yeah.
Like, I don't have to be best friends with my boss. Sometimes I am, but but you don't have to, like...
Yeah, and it's particularly weird, I think, when you have, like, your driver or like your housekeeper or whatever. I could see it'd be a weird, especially like your live-in housekeeper. Like, you probably want to keep an arm's length there. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why that'd be the thing, but there's just... I don't understand the hot takes in this movie.
Yeah, it doesn't really make any sense to me.
Yeah, I agree completely.
There's little lines here and there, and obviously, like, there's a lot of the poor family always walks down staircases, the rich family always walks up, but past that, where it's just so blatant.
So you bring up a really good point, and this is the thing this is why I like the movie, is because the direction of this movie is phenomenal.
Yes.
Like actually, like the decisions that are made, and this is really directorial decisions. This is not really so much editing is fine, and the writing is fine, and all of that stuff is good. But it's what you were just talking about. There are a lot of very interesting, very subtle, creative choices that are made that constantly reinforce important aspects of the characters or the themes in the film. Like you said, like the poor family is always walking down, the rich family is always walking up. You said this earlier, the poor family, their problems come from the bottom up, right? Later in the film, they have to actually go back to their kind of terrible basement apartment in the middle of a flood.
Right.
This is right after they had kind of taken over this living room, and they the family comes home early from their camping trip because it's raining hard and it's flooding, and
not just rainwater, it's sewage.
Well, when they get to their apartment, right? So it's flooding everywhere, but they have to escape this house so as to not lose their position by having messed up this whole living room and stuff. And so they go back to their basement apartment, and then sewage floods out of the toilets and everything else, and it's and people keep reinforcing this idea that the family smells a little weird, and that maybe they stink of this basement,
right,
or whatever. And they're all very subtle points, but they all add up to a constant reinforcement that this family is not good.
Right.
Like,
something's off.
Something's off. And people notice it, but they're either too polite to directly talk about it,
or they can't quite put their finger on it.
Right.
It's just this feeling, this pervasive sense of wrongness.
He almost crosses the line, but he never does.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, right. And so, well, and that's the thing. So the other part of this is that the rich family is being lied to the entire time, right? So they don't believe that any of these people are related, right? They believe that they have found a tutor, for an English tutor, an art teacher, a driver, and a maid, and a housekeeper. All of these people, of course, are the same family. And by the way, all of these people, through nefarious means, jettisoned their predecessors. Right.
Yeah.
So they,
all except the first.
Except for the first. That was the son's friend was deliberately sort of offering his buddy the job. But everybody else, his sister is not an art student. She's, whatever. She just came in and kind of BS'd her way into that job, and then she essentially framed the original driver and got him fired, and then they did the same thing effectively to the original housekeeper.
Yeah.
And so both those people were ejected from their positions by fraud, basically. And so all of these things are like, it's interesting, and especially in the context of like having the subtlety of like, there's something off about these guys. And so I was reading this review, not a normal place you'd think of film reviews, at least I wouldn't, but Marginal Revolution, which is a academic economist blog that I read and that I have friends who write for and stuff. But Alex Tabarrok, who's a policy analyst and economist and stuff, wrote a review of this movie that actually made me want to see it, because he talks about the movie and the hot takes about this movie as gaslighting. He was like, what people said about this movie, it's like not at all they are, because if this was really a class warfare thing, you would assume that the rich family was like actually really bad and the poor family was morally very good, but being
through no fault of their own. They've fallen on hard times.
Right. They've fallen on hard times, and the rich family mistreats them, and they are oppressed, and they're being exploited. But in fact, the reverse is true. This is a family that all of whom are perfectly capable individuals. There's nothing wrong with any of them, really, except for bad values. The first scene in the movie with them, they are working as a family, basically, folding pizza boxes for a pizza delivery, for a pizza restaurant. And a quarter of them are done improperly, not because they're incapable of doing it, but just because they're lazy, they don't want to do it. And then also the fumigation thing was funny because
Right.
like they're in the middle of folding boxes for food service, and the dad is like seeing somebody outside like spray for bugs, and he's like, "Oh, just leave the windows open. We'll get
Free pest
free
control.
pest control."
yeah.
And you go, while they're folding pizza boxes, these are bad decisions
Yeah.
that are not forced. You know, there's not nobody saying like exploiting these people, trying to make them do this or that. So I didn't understand like afterwards, I just could not understand the takes.
Yeah, it was very
Yeah.
surprising. Like I said earlier, like, there's a couple lines here and there where it's like, oh, the rich people, of course they'd say that, but
Yeah.
the main beats of the movie, the story,
No.
it just was
Doesn't hold up
No.
to that kind of
And that family
interpretation.
The family has agency the entire time.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
The family is the driver of the story. You would think that if it were reversed, that the family was being put upon by somebody else who is the driver of the story. But no, that family, everything that happens in that movie is a consequence. It's a direct action, or it's a consequence of those direct actions. So you
Like,
I
nothing-
just don't know how to justify that.
Like nothing that happens in that movie happens to the poor family.
Right.
It happens because the poor
Absolutely.
family.
And so I guess let's get into this is the more spoilery part of the plot, because the movie goes a little off the rails
Little
towards the
bit.
end.
Gets
Not
a little
necessarily-
intense.
I don't say in a bad way. Like I'm saying,
Wow.
like it takes a turn.
it's a yes.
It takes a
Yeah.
turn.
There is a twist.
There is a twist, and that twist is that the housekeeper that they ousted previously,
For tuberculosis.
or they
They
claimed
faked
that
a case of
they
tuberculosis.
faked- yes, they said that she was sick and that she was going to get the whole family sick and the whole thing. But she comes back in the middle of this rainstorm. She comes back and she says she has left something in the house. Would you please let me in? First of all, weird and red flags all over the place, but by goodness, they let her in. And she immediately goes to the basement, and she tries to push away this bookshelf, and lo and behold, there is a secret passage down to a sub-basement in this home where her husband has been living for years and years and years. And it is not entirely clear at first why. I guess he is evading some loan sharks
Right.
or something like that. But
Yeah.
but the son, and this was set up earlier, the son kept claiming that he saw ghosts in the house. And in fact,
The rich family son.
the rich
to
family
be clear.
son, yes, to be clear, yeah, sorry, there are many people involved here, but the rich family son claimed that he had seen ghosts. What he actually seen was the husband
Right.
of this man.
That was living in
Was living in the
the
basement.
bunker.
The bunker. And from there, things go very nuts.
Yes, they do. And I will say when the wealthy mother is describing the incident where her son, the young son, first saw the ghost, like that shot of the housekeeper's husband coming
Yeah.
up the stairs.
Very creepy.
It's very creepy.
Which you don't know. At
Which
the
you-
time.
no.
You don't know who that is.
And it's like that was my favorite shot of the
Yeah.
whole film.
Yeah.
It was just so extra.
Well,
and
and
perfect.
it is interesting that the youngest son is the only one who's kind of figured out what's going
Yeah.
on, or at least he's the only one who's observant enough.
Right.
Yeah.
He knows Morse code.
He knows Morse code.
He smelled them all and said they all smell
Yeah.
the same.
They all smell
Yeah.
the same. That was an interesting line too. It's like the only one who put together that they all smelled the same, and maybe there's something connected about them.
Yeah.
But then, by the
Good.
way, his dad sort of chastises him. Oh, that's rude. Like,
Yeah.
don't comment on people's
Right.
whatever. Again, the rich family's generally being polite, and you wouldn't blame a 7-year-old whatever
No.
boy
No.
for
That
doing
is
what 7-year-old boys.
perfectly on brand for that
Right.
for that age.
Right.
Like that's yep.
know?
Yep, they're gonna do stuff like that.
But-
they're gonna say things like
Man,
that.
in any case, once they get down there, you know, the new family, the poor family, realizes that essentially between them and the housekeeper, who realizes that they are connected and they are actually a family. And it's not all. So she immediately puts together that she was actually sort of booted out of her position. So she finds a way to try to blackmail them, or she's going to blackmail them with some video showing them as a family. And as a result, murder ensues.
Yeah.
Lots and lots of attempted murders, and then some carried out actual murders.
Right.
And it's
Also could be construed as kidnapping as well.
kidnapping.
Definitely.
Yes, definitely.
Yes.
100%. So, there's a lot of violence that ensues at the end of the movie because the original housekeeper knows the truth about all of this. And by the way, she also has just as much or maybe not just as much, but also a good reason to want to reclaim her position there,
Right.
because her husband's living in the basement secretly. So everybody's taking advantage of this family. But the crazy thing to me, and I said this before we started here, was when I looked on Hulu, the description said symbiotic relationship between families.
That is not what symbiotic means.
The movie is called Parasite for a reason.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think. It feels like they got that right.
Yes. And it's the takes have been so wrong after watching and thinking about this that it's almost feels intentional
Yeah, I don't know.
to be just that willfully, like, is it for the Oscar?
But
So that actually makes some sense. So I'm not really one that particularly prone to conspiracy theories, but I mean, winning an Oscar is tough, right? And winning an Oscar is indeed fairly political, and it's something that you have to sell. Mm-hmm. We know that Oscars tend to like really egalitarian kind of movies. They, Snowpiercer already had that reputation, right? And also, I think Okja did the same kind of thing, right? I didn't watch it, but I think it was kind of an animal rights kind of movie, and.
So what do you think was the idea that the director wanted to get across? Because it's definitely not what you go in expecting.
That's tough. I really don't know. I mean, there's a part of me that wants to not overanalyze, because there is just a really straightforward story here, straightforward horror thriller kind of story. And, quite a lot of the time we watch those kinds of movies and we don't put a lot of additional, gravitas around that. But we are doing that because it's a foreign film. You know what I mean? But I think if you watched a movie, I'm trying to think think about something like I think Tyler Perry's like Acrimony or something like one of the horror kind of thrillers that he's done in the last few years, where all it is just the descent into madness of like a relationship gone wrong, or it's like somebody getting too obsessive or whatever. And we don't do any of these like, oh, well, what did you think Tyler Perry really meant by, having this woman stalk this guy or whatever, I mean? Like,
yeah, it doesn't.
I think he meant to tell a thrilling story.
It doesn't necessarily have to be more than what.
So I don't want to
what was shown.
overdo it. But on the other hand, I mean, it really was an Oscar bait kind of thing. So maybe there was.
Yeah, it feels very weird.
Yeah.
To me, it's definitely like choices have consequences.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's for every single character, poor, rich.
Yep.
Whatever you decide that has consequence. But yeah, the symbiotic relationship.
That is just the wrong way to frame it.
Yeah.
Outright.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe check the references on applicants for the job you're posting.
There are some very good lessons to be learned from this movie. Regardless of whether or not those were the themes that Bong Joon-ho intended. Check references. That is a good one.
Check references.
Don't just let anyone into the house.
Yeah. They're
probably a good idea.
Also have a good home inspector.
Yeah.
You could find that bunker.
Would have found that
pretty quickly.
Yeah.
You would hope.
You would. They did. I will say the movie did make some excuse for why.
Yeah.
They
There
didn't have
was
it.
some explanation given for
Which
that.
does make sense.
And it did. So what the explanation is that there's only two owners of this home. So they're the family that lives in there now, the Park family, and then prior to that was the architect who actually built the home, designed and built the home. And I guess the architect himself was,
a bit embarrassed that
He was embarrassed. He had like a little bit of like a, what if North Korea attacks kind of bunker ready to go. But honestly, like, I don't know why, if you were selling this to other rich people, you go, there's a safe room downstairs.
Yeah.
You could.
I mean, I would want to know if I was buying a house if there was a safe room.
Sure. Me too. Especially if I were worth the millions and millions of dollars that these people clearly are. The house is amazing.
Yeah.
Cinematography is great. And it showcases like just once again, the directorial choices here are really, really strong. I mean, they are constantly reinforcing everything, both about the wealthy family and the less wealthy family. I mean, it's just that part of it is so good, and yet, it is hard to care or like much about people who are that awful.
Yeah, they're pretty bad.
Yeah.
A lot of this would have just been solved too with deodorant.
Yes. Well, they even talk about it too.
Liberal application of some perfume.
They talk about the idea of doing laundry in different different locations or wearing different
soaps,
different soaps, whatever. They never do.
No.
Although I don't think that would have solved their ultimate problem, because they do call one of the kids shouts out "Dad" or something,
when they all fall down the stairs.
So I don't know. Yeah. So would you recommend Parasite?
I would, yes. It's really, really good movie. Like I said earlier, it surprised me. I was not going in expecting that I would enjoy this really at all. It's probably one I will go back and watch again because I feel like there's a lot of things that you could get from a second watching. Because the first time I'm just like, what is going on?
Yeah, you're almost certainly right about that.
So I would definitely recommend, check it out. It's on Hulu. Mm-hmm. So, if you have Hulu, it's already there. So it's pretty easy to find.
I agree. I think I would also recommend it. I'm surprised to find myself saying that. I did not expect to recommend it going in. I also agree with, although I probably will not revisit it, given how much I have praised the direction for this movie, it would not surprise me in the slightest if there were a dozen other layers of things that I did not see the first time around. So probably would warrant a repeat viewing, but I probably won't do that because I hated everybody.
Well, there you go. I would recommend this to a highly specific audience.
Fair.
Like, it was, in many ways, a beautiful movie. It was stunning. I just didn't care for it, is really what it comes down to. I didn't care for the storytelling choices that were set up at the beginning of the movie. And that's just like my personal preference. But I can see how other people have just had these glowing reviews for it. But that said, I would be very, very aware and very specific in who I would recommend this movie to. And I will not be watching it again.
Well, on that note, that will do it for today's episode of the Out of Frame podcast. If you are a Patreon subscriber, stick around. We will have a bonus section right after this talking about The Prestige, which is our Patreon movie club movie. If you're not a member of our Patreon group, join us on Patreon at patreon.com/outoframeshow. And as
get
always,
these cool mugs.
You could get these cool mugs.
Yeah.
And some stickers. We've done all kinds of cool stuff that will be coming your way fairly soon. And yeah, as always, please subscribe to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/FeeOnline, and subscribe on Instagram, Twitter, everywhere else. And we will see you next time. Thank you.